Okay, good morning, everyone. I call this meeting to order. And I'll just go over some routine matters. Those who are in the room, we're still under public health measures here on the Hill, and so if you're sitting, we need to respect the 2-meter rule, or we need to socially distance. If you're around the table and you're socially distanced, of course, you don't need to wear a mask, but all others in the room, including staff, should be wearing a mask. For those who are appearing today as witnesses via Zoom, please keep your mic on mute when not speaking. You can, of course, speak in either official language. And I think that pretty much covers it. I would, before we get going, though, excuse me, I would ask members to adopt, if they wish, obviously, the third report of the Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure. Do I have agreement to adopt the report? Yeah. Okay. I see thumbs up. No objections. So the report is deemed adopted. That was nice and easy. Okay, so this is our second to last meeting as part of the fossil fuel subsidy study. Ce matin, nous avons pour la première.
This morning, for the first hour, we have with us Mr. Justin Leroux, who's appearing as an individual. He's a professor of applied economics at HEC Montreal and co-director ethics and economics at Centre de Recherche en Éthique. And also as an individual, we have Dr. Jason McLean.
Law, University of New Brunswick, et également avec nous.
In addition, we have representatives of Export Development Canada, including the president, Ms. Marie Lavery, the Chief Corporate Sustainability Officer and Senior Vice President, Sustainable Business Enablement, Justine Hendricks, as well as Sarah Fulton, Senior Advisor, Environmental, Social and Governance Policy. So, each witness will have 3 minutes to make an opening statement, and then we will proceed with rounds of questions from each party. So, Mr. Leroux, Professor Leroux, we'll start with you for 3 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wish to thank the committee for the opportunity of contributing to this discussion.
Economic arguments and ethical concerns. But first, I would like to get the definition of an inefficient subsidy on record. A subsidy is any government support that confers a market advantage. For example, a tax credit is a subsidy. The OBPS is a subsidy. As far as inefficiency is concerned, economic principles tell us that any program that does not pass the cost-benefit test is inefficient. As a result, some fossil fuel subsidies may not be inefficient, like small and temporary programs that aim at providing energy security to remote communities until they can transition. However, most fossil fuel subsidies are inefficient because the oil and gas sector is already a profitable one. They amount to funneling taxpayer money to shareholders and executives while undermining emissions reduction efforts. Now onto the CCUS tax credit. I claim that it is both inefficient and unethical. It is inefficient because the oil and gas sector has the wherewithal to invest in this technology on their own. If they do not find it profitable, it is because the reward for cleaning up, meaning the carbon price, is too low. Better to increase the carbon price and use public dollars to support vulnerable households. It is unethical because taxpayer dollars should go towards furthering the transition, not slowing it down. CCUS is not a transition technology. It is a cleanup technology. It is imperfect, unproven at scale, and does not capture a host of other pollutants. If your teenager smokes cigarettes inside the house while grandma is ill and getting worse from secondhand smoke, you don't buy your child an air purifier. You scold them when they smoke, that's the carbon price, and you encourage them to chew gum instead. That's the transition. Lastly, I would like to clarify a few things related to plastics, jobs, and meeting global demand. This discussion is not about the elimination of fossil fuels, but about the elimination of fossil fuel subsidies. So those who fear a shortage of polymers like plastic and rubber should not worry. Should it ever arrive, the polymer crisis is far away and we'll tackle it then. Better to kick that can down the road than the climate can, if you will. Next, the jobs argument is a fallacious one. Yes, removing subsidies may cost jobs in this sector, but these jobs are jobs that will be shifted to other sectors that require the valuable knowledge and skills these workers hold, the development of clean energy, energy consultancy, and so on. This can be scary, especially for workers who are in the later stages of their careers. That is why public dollars are better spent on reskilling, upskilling, and generous relocation packages for oil and gas workers and their families. And lastly, I am unmoved by the argument that the world needs Canadian oil and that we should step up our production to meet global demand out of solidarity for other countries facing an oil crunch. Meeting global demand is not our duty as a nation. Honoring our climate pledge is and is the best act of solidarity we can do right now. I'm happy to talk about other topics like inflation and competitiveness should you ask about them. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Professor Leroux. Dr. McLean, you have 3 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss fossil fuel subsidies and Canadian climate and energy policy. I'd like to make 3 points and signal their most important implications. The first and most important point is this: the imperative of eliminating all fossil fuel subsidies is a means to an end, and we must not lose sight of the end goal. The end goal is not the elimination of all fossil fuel subsidies. The end goal is phasing out all fossil fuel extraction, production, export, and use in Canada as soon as possible. Eliminating all fossil fuel subsidies is a necessary but in itself insufficient means of achieving this end goal. Eliminating all fossil fuel subsidies may be the easiest of all the steps necessary to phase out Canadian fossil fuel industry production, and it should be done immediately. Subsidies will only prolong and complicate this inevitable phase out. Now, I'm mindful of the possibility that this statement this morning may sound radical outside the Canadian Overton window. This is a testament to the fossil fuel industry's ongoing regulatory capture of Canada's climate and energy policy imagination. But this is not a radical proposition. It is based instead on leading independent peer-reviewed climate science and policy research. Climate modeling now shows that in order to have only a 50% chance of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial norm, rich producer countries, including Canada, must cut oil and gas production by 74% by 2030 and completely phase out oil production by 2034. Removing all fossil fuel subsidies is an important step toward this larger climate and energy policy goal. Second, we can no longer afford, with great respect, to engage in semantic wordplay with respect to the meaning of the term subsidy, as so many in Canada want to do. There's no basis in international law or policy for distinguishing between efficient and inefficient subsidies, nor is there any basis for adopting a narrow definition of the term subsidy in relation to fossil fuels. The World Trade Organization's definition is well established and long-standing. A subsidy is a financial contribution by a government or any public body which confers a benefit. This is plainly a broad definition, and it's a definition that other international bodies follow, notably the United Nations Environment Program. Third, eliminating all fossil fuel subsidies will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and support the transition to decarbonization. In its latest major assessment report on climate change mitigation, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change discusses the following benefits of complete fossil fuel subsidy removal. According to the IPCC, removing fossil fuel subsidies will reduce emissions, improve public revenue and macroeconomic performance, and yield other environmental and sustainable development benefits. Finally, I want to emphasize the 3 most important policy implications of these 3 points for Canada's current climate and energy policy. First, the government should immediately cancel the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion project. The government should not approve or otherwise support any new fossil fuel development in Canada, meaning that it should also rescind its recent and improper approval of the Bay du Nord offshore oil project. Second, the government should rescind the investment tax credit for carbon capture utilization and storage announced in the recent federal budget and cancel all other financial support. Can I briefly just make my third point?
In 5 seconds, yes.
Canada must not only continue to raise its carbon price, but it must shore up all of the loopholes. Thank you very much. I
Thank
look
you very
forward
much.
to your
Okay,
questions.
we'll go now to Ms. Lavery.
Monsieur le Président, honorable members,
Mr. Chairman, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, it's with great pleasure that I join you today in order to help the committee study fossil fuel subsidies and shed light on the role of Export Development Canada in this important sector. This role is anchored in the mandate of our organization, which is to promote and support Canadian exports to the entire world in all sectors of the economy and in all regions of the country.
where EDC operates on commercial terms, providing financing solutions, equity, and insurance. The funds we use for our exporting financing are drawn from our revenues, the returns of our commercial activities. Consistent with this model, EDC does not provide grants or subsidies. Our mandate is also bound by the additional expectations of the Government of Canada and indeed the Canadian public that we help Canada meet the challenge of global warming. Growing Canadian exports, contributing to Canada's economy, responding to the crisis of climate change. This is our business landscape today, and it has been evolving dramatically in recent years. As such, EDC's approach to oil and gas has evolved as well. In just 3 years between 2018 and 2021, EDC's support for this sector has decreased by approximately 65%. EDC has committed to cease any new financing to international fossil fuel companies or their projects by the end of this year. And today we continue to review our lending portfolio, making decisions on where to divest and where to end current international relationships that are inconsistent with our low carbon goals. Of course, where we choose to invest is just as critical. Today, EDC is one of Canada's largest financial backers of clean technology. Over the last 10 years, we have facilitated approximately $20 billion in clean tech exports. And last year, for the first time, our support for clean technology surpassed our support for the oil and gas sector. And that is a trend we expect to continue. EDC has worked with hundreds of companies, large and small, across all of Canada and across the oil and gas sector. From all of them, we hear the same expectation that Canada's transition to a low-carbon economy must be orderly, and the companies engaged in that transition will require significant capital to make the green investments needed. Just as EDC plays a key role in supporting clean technology, we believe equally that we can help oil and gas companies make their transition within a low-carbon Canadian economy. That is the balance EDC seeks to strike in this fast-evolving landscape. Thank you for this opportunity. My colleagues and I look forward to your comments and questions.
Thank you, Ms. Lavery. We'll go to Mr. Dreeshen for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses that are here today. As a politician, as a person from Alberta, and listening to some of the commentary that I've heard here this morning, it gives me somewhat of a pause. I think about the amazing things environmentally that have been done in my province, and I try to look to the future as to a world where we are looking at lithium pit mines, we are looking at all of the other types of things that will be required in order to meet the government goals of whether they be 2030, 2035, and so on. I do believe that those people that are suggesting that we move as quickly as possible, that their hearts are in the right place, that they feel that this is something that will be useful. Sadly, if you think that your community and those of us that are members of Parliament, if you think that in your community that an open pit mine is going to be welcome, I think we're missing the point. If people want, perhaps they could go up to Fort McMurray and take a look at what an open pit mine looks like after 40 years of reclamation. If that's what's going to happen in this country, then it'll be great for everyone. I think the war in Ukraine has brought into focus a real energy dilemma, and there's a real dramatic shift in energy security as the world is no longer looking at the future through green-colored glasses. And I want to speak specifically to EDC, because I have been on international trade meetings throughout the world, and we have talked about how our businesses and our energy is able to help those people in places where they need to have a strong functioning product so that they can do that which is necessary to improve their lives. If Canadian energy is blocked from these markets, I'm sure that your offices in EDC would know what other countries will fill the void. And my question is this: what type of strategy do you have such that it removes our ability to supply ethically produced and managed hydrocarbon products just to have these products replaced by other players? EDC, please.
Thank you, Mr. Dressen, for your comments and for the question. So as I mentioned in my remark, we think of this situation, the economy and environment, as two sides of the same coin. You can't address one without the other. There are economic opportunities and challenges linked to any environment action. So our strategy at EDC is quite appropriate. It's that we continue to support Canadian companies. We have indicated COP26 last year that we are withdrawing support for international fossil fuel companies and their projects, and diverting our attention to the support of Canadian companies and really working with the industry to understand their own pathway. Many of the Canadian oil and gas companies have signed up to a net zero commitment. So we want to work with them to understand what that means for technology, what that means for clean technology in particular, and their investments in research and development, so that we can be with them on that journey as they work towards a low carbon future.
Thank you very much. And I think that's important for people to realize that what you are saying about other international companies is that you're not going to be including them in opportunities with Canadian research or Canadian dollars. It's going to be the Canadian companies, as they have done, which they have always done, and that is to be the most ethically minded and environmentally sensitive producers of oil and gas on the planet, and that you are going to be working with them in order to make sure that that works. Now, the other point, and again, we are talking about subsidies. What we have heard around this table is that the fact that money is lent to these companies for them in commercial rates and so on, that in itself is a subsidy, and that is why you hear these billions of dollars that where Canadians are subsidizing the oil and gas industry. Can you talk a little bit about the commercial rates and the commercial aspect of EDC?
You have about a minute, Ms. Lavery.
Thank you. So maybe I would just say that very often we actually work in support of commercial partners, particularly the banks, the Canadian banks. So we are always operating at market rates. They may change depending on the obligor or the situation within a respective company, but we are very careful to ensure that we are always participating at the market rates, and often do that with other partners.
So you can categorically say that it is not a subsidy that is being given to Canadians, to Canadian companies that are using EDC as one of the tools for management throughout the world.
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Weiler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd also like to thank our witnesses for joining the committee meeting today. Last year, the IEA said that there should be no new unabated fossil fuel extraction projects going forward. And oil-producing countries like the UK, which also produce a significant amount of oil, have already directed their export finance to stop funding fossil fuel projects. And this year, Canada's committed to ending unabated fossil fuel overseas funding for fossil fuels. But in your testimony, you mentioned that EDC is committed to cease any new financing to international fossil fuel companies or their projects by the end of this year, which is a welcome improvement on EDC's previous commitment of a 40% reduction in finance plan for the fossil fuel this year. So my question for EDC through you, Mr. Chair, is EDC prepared to cease funding to unabated fossil fuel production this year?
So thank you for the question, Mr. Wheeler. We have made our statements pre-COP26, so it said we are absolutely exiting the financing, any new financing for international companies and their projects by the end of 2022. So we have stated that.
Okay, maybe a follow-up to that. Does that include unabated fossil fuel projects that are led by Canadian companies?
So we have said that we would want to continue to review the domestic production and the domestic companies and our support for them. As with all EDC transactions, they involve a review of individual companies and individual transactions. We did just announce our sustainable bond framework and indicated that we are pivoting our support towards transition financing and the reduction of GHG and making the production more efficient at this stage.
Okay, and how does EDC, you mentioned in your testimony that EDC had provided support of, or finance of $20 billion for clean tech exports. How does EDC define what a clean tech export is?
Thank you for the question. We have actually quite a broad definition of clean technology. It includes anything from renewable energy to waste management to water management to green buildings. And we were very particular in defining in our new sustainable bond framework what we consider to be green projects, what we also consider to be social, as well as what we consider to be transition financing projects.
Thank you for that. Maybe building on that point on the sustainable bond framework, you mentioned that it does allow money to flow to fossil fuel companies, which of course Canada's green bond does not. So why does EDC target supporting or financing fossil fuel projects through a new finance product that's being created, of course, in this year?
Yes, so very similar to Government of Canada, we have our green bond product, which does not support, but this is a new product, the transition bond. It's a recognition that we need to get in and help these companies move faster towards reducing their GHG emissions. So this is that's why we have the purpose of a transition financing product. So it's really got some drivers in it to force more efficiency faster. It also includes disclosure requirements, and it includes monitoring and a link to a Paris-linked plan for transition by those companies. So therefore, we believe we're actually using our leverage to work with existing companies to help them change faster.
And when you mentioned that there's a requirement within this bond framework to have a Paris-aligned plan, does that just mean net zero by 2050, or what are the interim targets that EDC is looking at for companies to abide by as part of this bond framework?
Yeah, so I think 2050 is perhaps the end game for any of us working in this space. It's about actually interim targets. It's about looking at pathways. It's about looking at Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions, and actually working on a plan to get there. So a plan just cannot be, we will be net zero by 2050. It has to have interim elements attached to it. It has to show progress, and like any plan, it must be monitored. So we will need to see progress in the reporting from the companies that would be applicable for transition financing.
So as part of this bond framework and the other products that are offered by EDC, what proportion, if any, is being set aside to ensure that we're actually supporting projects like renewable energy products and companies that are actually going to lead to more of a transition to renewable energy rather than having this support going to fossil fuel companies to help them reduce their emissions?
30 seconds, please.
So we have looked at our portfolio in the future and indicated how we would like to pivot that. That results in the teams having very clear capital allocations for the purposes of clean technology, as well then as linked to our statement saying that we are not supporting new international financing of fossil fuel companies and their projects going forward.
And maybe last question, how is EDC looking at the risk of new financing for fossil fuel projects in light of stranded assets that might be financed through some of these new products?
Sorry, we're out of time. Maybe you could address that in response as a preamble to your answer to another question. That's how we tend to do it in the committee to get around these time limits. Madame Posey, à vous la parole.
Oui, alors d'abord, merci beaucoup.
Ms. Posey, I wish to thank all the witnesses who made themselves available to answer our questions. My questions would be to Professor Leroux. I know that 400 academics had signed a letter saying that we shouldn't be having subsidies or tax credit for carbon capturing. The letter stated that it might be necessary not to necessarily reject this technology, but we could have decarbonization solutions excluding the oil and gas sector. Unfortunately, that's not what we see in the 2022 budget. So it was clear to you that that subsidy or that tax credit is a subsidy to the sector. For a short time, at least I've found out recently, that there is an obligation to retake carbon where the responsibility of producers comes into full force. Let's say I have 1 barrel that produces 1 ton of greenhouse gases. I have to capture 1 ton. This is an approach that would grow. In your opinion, would such regulations be appropriate for the cost and put it on the shoulders of consumers of fossil fuels and on producers rather than all taxpayers by siphoning public funds? Thank you for your question, Ms. Posey. The obligation to retake carbon is a constraint for the oil and gas industry. We're asking them to compensate for greenhouse gases involved in the production and combustion of these fuels. And that could go up to 100% by 2050 to attain carbon neutrality. So that policy does put the burden on the industry and does not use public funds to achieve that. It doesn't siphon public funds, as you put it. But having said that, I think it's important to note 2 things. First of all, there's the crucial aspect of this measure. It's carbon not just when the fossil fuels are produced, but also combustion. So downstream emissions are taken into account in all that. That's important to consider. We could do that with a carbon price. The other side of the coin is it doesn't prevent the political temptation to subsidize investments in the same way as we've done. There's all kinds of loopholes. Even if the measure itself makes sense and puts the burden on the industry, nothing prevents the government from trying to subsidize those investments. Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. You're also a member of the Canadian Institute for Climate Choices, and your research is on the equitable distribution of and shared costs. With other witnesses, we broached the topic that Canada offers 14.5 times more subsidies to carbon-based industries than renewable energy. That disproportionate amount seems problematic to us. What would be fair in federal policy to combat climate change? And could that distribution be a little fairer? Yes, I did want to mention that I belong to that institute, but I'm speaking on my own behalf, not on behalf of the institute. It's difficult to talk about fairness in this industry. My work is about sharing the burden between citizens and jurisdictions. So the disproportion of public support for various energy sectors does not necessarily constitute a violation of the equity principle, but it is a political choice. By massively supporting an industry that is already profitable, Canada has made its political choice. That's the extent of what I could say about fairness. It's not that clear. You can't compare it as easily as I'd like to do. Now, loans at preferential rates, to your mind, are they subsidies or not? You established in your opening statement what a subsidy is, but is a low interest rate subsidy? You have 45 seconds, Professor. Well, the key word is preferential rate here. As soon as you have a preferential rate, you have a commercial advantage, and that constitutes a subsidy to me. Thank you very much, Mr. Leroux. Thank you. You have about 30 seconds left, Ms. Posey, for a comment, I think. Well, a comment. Well, look, I remember that when the vice president, I believe, of the Canadian oil producers came to talk to us the first time, he said that the industry was not in a position to invest in carbon capture. I just want to point that out. They're too poor. Ms. Collins, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is to Dr. McLean. You spoke about how the oil and gas industry has captured Canada's regulatory framework. The government seems to be listening to fossil fuel companies instead of experts. You are one of the signatories on the letter signed by 400 academics urging the government not to go ahead with the CCUS tax credit. At a recent Natural Resources Committee meeting, Minister Wilkinson dismissed that letter saying, and I quote, "The 400 were not experts in the field." How would you respond to that?
I would respond to that by saying that that's plainly not true. The over 400 signatories to the letter, myself included, are all experts in a variety of aspects when it comes to climate change research, whether it's climate science or climate policy, including energy modelers. So there's just absolutely no basis to that remark.
Thank you so much. And to Mr. Leroux? The same question.
The same question, absolutely. So the same answer, really, the same thing. I'm also a signatory of that letter, and my expertise is not in technical climate science, it's in economics, and there is an economics argument to be made within that letter, and this is why I signed on.
Wonderful, thank you. And can you speak, either, actually maybe both of you, a little bit more to the government's being captured by the oil and gas industry and who they are listening to when developing these policies?
This one is for Dr. McLean.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. When we refer to regulatory capture, we're talking about a situation where the public interest in laws and regulations has been shifted to serving the interests of special vested interests. And this has long been the case with respect to environment, energy, and climate policy in Canada, and unfortunately remains the case. The investment tax credit is a perfect example. It's pouring billions of dollars into an unproven technology, a technology that's been researched and publicly financed for decades and remains utterly ineffective. This will help prop up an industry that otherwise has to be phased out, and there can be no debate about the fact that it has to be phased out. That's an unequivocal finding of climate science. But instead, the government, and I would just note about the letter that the signatories to the letter, we requested a meeting with the government to air our concerns, and the government didn't even meet with us to hear our concerns. And I think that that's Exhibit A of regulatory capture when you have over 400 experts, interdisciplinary experts, on the most pressing policy problem facing the country, and you decide not to even meet? It's because your mind is already made up, and your mind has been made up by the oil and gas industry. And that's what regulatory capture is.
Thank you so much. And you've answered this, both of you, in other ways, but just a quick yes or no question. I'm going to go to all three witnesses. First to you, Dr. McLean. Do you consider money that the government gives to fossil fuel subsidies to engage in CCUS to be a fossil fuel subsidy?
Absolutely.
And Mr. Lura?
You mean as a tax credit? Yes, then absolutely. Yeah.
And to Ms. Lavery?
So I can't speak about all government funding. I can only speak about what EDC does, and it is not a subsidy.
Thank you. And to Ms. Lavery or the others at EDC, you were asked by one of my colleagues about how EDC is assessing the risk of stranded assets and carbon lock-in in its financing decisions. Do you mind answering that question?
No, not at all. So we've been working on climate stress tests for quite a considerable period of time. We've actually been working with some methodologies. We're looking forward to the Bank of Canada's methodology that's very specific to Canada, but that's how we look at our own financing book to ensure that we understand the risk of stranded assets. That, together with our divesting strategy over the last 3 years, which has reduced any risk that existed in 2018.
And you talked a little bit about how EDC is currently defining clean tech. Clearly, this is including CCUS and blue hydrogen, aka fossil fuel hydrogen, in the definition of clean tech. This seems like it will impact the credibility and won't really help the reputation of EDC when it comes to financing fossil fuel subsidies. Would you, first of all, would you mind sharing with the committee all the transactions EDC includes in its clean tech number, just as a follow-up to our committee, if you don't mind submitting that to us after this? And I'm curious if EDC has plans to come up with a clear, sustainable finance taxonomy, which excludes fossil fuel financing, like the Canada Green Bond Framework, or if they're going to continue, it sounds like, shoveling public money towards fossil fuels under the name of clean tech.
So, I hate to do this again to you, Ms. Lavery, but I think you'll have to reserve the answer as the preamble to an answer to another question. We'll go now to Mr. Carey for 5 minutes.
And Mr. Chair, could I just get a confirmation?
Sorry.
Could I just get a confirmation that will be provided with those documents?
Yes, please. Yes, Ms. Lavery, can you just confirm that information will be forthcoming? Yeah.
So I'll just confirm it's an analysis of the types of clean technology support that we provide by category. Is that what
all the transactions?
All of our transactions are recorded on our website. I assume you want some type of combination of that?
Of the number of clean tech.
Great. Okay, Mr. Carey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Madame Lavery. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here. My first question is to you. We saw a 2022 report, Environmental Defense found that in 2021, the federal government provided $8.6 billion in financial support to the oil and gas sector, which included over $5 billion in public funding provided through EDC. And, in your opening statement, you said that you do not provide, subsidies and things like that. So where does that number come from in the Environmental Defense report?
Thank you, Mr. Carey. So I'm very clear we do not provide subsidies. EDC has provided support to the oil and gas industry and companies in the oil and gas industry, and that number has been significantly reducing in the last 3 years. In fact, it's reduced by 65%. I can't speak to the specifics of the Environmental and Defense report, but I can confirm that in 2021, we did provide $4.4 billion of support to the oil and gas industries.
Yeah, as I look at this entire issue, I think one of the problems we have is the agreed definition of what is a subsidy and what's not a subsidy. And I was wondering if I could get your thoughts on that because, I come from Oshawa, and Oshawa has a auto industry, and internationally, it doesn't necessarily mean it's Canada's desire to play the game, if I can use that term. But if other countries are going to support their sector, if we don't have some type of support, then our sectors die, the jobs go with it. And we see with the energy sector, especially for national security, and we're seeing the war in Europe. I don't necessarily agree with witnesses that says we have to, phase out the sector 100%. I think in the future we're going to have certain requirements. But I was wondering if you could comment on, is there any internationally agreed upon definitions that we could look at as far as what is a subsidy and what's not a subsidy?
So I'm not aware of any agreed international definition. I do understand that there are a number of government departments who are currently looking at that, and we provide our advice to them. What I can say, Mr. Carey, is EDC's been operating for 76 years. We operate under OECD and WTO principles, which actually ensure that we are not conferring a subsidy because it's a level playing field operation that we are part of as an export credit agency. So for us, our work with our partners and ensuring that we are really in support of commercial partners like our banks ensures that we're not conferring a subsidy, we are at market rates.
And I appreciate that very much. Again, my experience in Oshawa, if there's something that is declared a subsidy, you're opening yourself up to WTO challenges and things like that. Just another point, we've had different groups in front of us, and some of the things that oil companies do when they go into a community and they are producing oil and gas, they have support programs for different indigenous groups and things like that. Again, would this be something that people would define as a subsidy of sort, or some players?
I'm not sure, Mr. Carey. And typically, we would put that under the definition of community investment. And what I can say is under ESG and the way ESG definitions are changing, that community investment, while appreciated and often needed in these specific communities, is not enough to deal with the environmental challenge. So when we look at the definitions and when we look at what we're looking for specific action plans to address emission reductions, as well then as activities that companies are doing for their social license. But you're absolutely right. We do see significant amounts of research and development in clean technology done by oil and gas companies, and our oil and gas companies and our mining companies are some of the largest supporters through their supply chain of Indigenous companies.
Yeah, thank you very much. I do, again, have experience with Canadians tend to be, and I hate to use the term, sort of like the Boy Scouts internationally, like when you're looking at reporting, things along those lines. Do you know of different international agreements on reporting and transparency that you might be able to comment on? I worry, again, you see the east coast of Canada importing oil from places like Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, places as far as human rights are concerned. I think many of us make moral judgments on saying, where does this oil and gas come from? And if we could have it through Canadian sources.
I'm afraid we're out of time, Mr. Carey.
It might be a good idea. Are we? Darn.
Yeah.
Darn, Francis. Okay, I'll have to come back to that.
Yeah. Mr. Longfield for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses, and thank you to Mr. Carey for taking all of my questions. I'm looking at. I wanted to continue the line of questioning, though, with EDC. Thinking of the definition of subsidy, we've heard a couple of definitions in our meeting so far this morning. I know there are many more definitions out there. You were mentioning to Mr. Carey about the operationalizing of the word subsidy within EDC and the use of market rates as a way of ensuring that subsidies aren't being used to unlevel the playing field. Is there more that you can add to that comment?
Certainly, thank you for that. So it's just normal operational practice at EDC, regardless of the sector. This is something that we're very conscious of. We are there to fill market gaps and therefore always operate under market principles and market practices. So that means that we are always benchmarking our rates, whether that's in our insurance products or in our financing products, but very particularly in our financing products. Oftentimes we are part of a commercial syndication or a commercial deal. So we have access to very specific information from commercial players on the rates in those transactions. And therefore we would not be setting the specific rates. We would be taking the commercial rate in the specific transaction. Where we are operating standalone, then we actually ask for evidence to prove market rates. So previous transactions, we're always monitoring the rates on the market, etc. Hopefully that helps answer your question.
That does. I think part of this study that isn't in the room is the global market that we're operating within that has oil and gas as a commodity that's sought around the world and produced in many countries, including Canada. The definition of subsidy that's being used in the world is one that is still in development. We don't have a solid definition. World Trade Organization is one that most countries are leaning towards. The United States as a player in this market is very significant, with them having operations in Canada that can easily move back to the United States, which we see in Alberta every time there's a drop in the price of oil in the global market. How does EDC evaluate the opportunities Canada has in the global market, such as exporting natural gas or such as exporting hydrogen that's produced in Canada?
So thank you for that question. It's something that we continuously monitor. So we do have a team at EDC, an economics team, that are monitoring Canadian export trends, as well as continuing to update themselves on the 196 countries that we support around the world. So they're continually watching that. We don't necessarily get involved in the pricing of oil, other than to understand the trends in that, what it might mean to the portfolio and what it might mean to the level of support that is provided to the industry overall from commercial banking partners, because that plays a significant role in the support of commercial players.
Thank you for that. And you mentioned about ESG. It was just a brief mention in one of your answers. Could you expand on the environmental, social, and governance aspect of risk management? We're looking at getting to net zero electric grid by 2035. I know the Electricity Association in Canada is very keen on advancing that goal. How do you use that in your decision making?
Well, we use it everywhere in our decision making, and we've come out very clearly and said it underpins all of our strategy. And perhaps if I may share with the committee just some of the dilemmas that can raise for you. One of the current dilemmas that is very challenging is, in fact, with respect to the solar industry, which of course we all want to support, and given the renewables and it as being an energy source for the future. Yet there are significant challenges in supply chains and questions of human rights in the solar supply chain. So this is where you cannot either take the economy and environment as two separate questions. You cannot take the environment away from the social question, the just transition, the labor transition, the human rights question, nor can you take it away from what we would consider governance, which is responsible business. So whether that includes ethical business conduct, proper financial conduct of transactions. So we need to have due diligence that looks at all of those elements.
Thank you. Madame Posey, pour 2 minutes et demie, s'il vous plaît.
Ms. Posey, for 2.5 minutes, please. 2.5 minutes. Time flies. Okay. Ms. Levery, I had a request for you. You said that for the first time, investments in clean energy surpassed those to the fossil fuel industry. I was wondering if you could table, well, in the next couple of weeks, some kind of report to the committee. I have a question for either Mr. McLean or Mr. Leroux. Maybe both could answer. In the last 30 seconds I had earlier, I said that 6 of the biggest oil and gas companies gave $79 million to their 6 top executives. They said, we can't do transition, we need public money, but they don't do innovation, and they want to continue their production. What do those words mean to you? And the time we're wasting about efficient, not efficient, is time we're wasting in going to a real transition.
Qui veut répondre en premier?
Who wants to answer first? I can answer, if you wish. I think that, well, I don't know the exact accounts of these companies. I trust you about the figures. But I think the profitability of a company is always something it seeks out. It's important that companies be profitable. I'm talking about companies in general, business in general, not just oil and gas. Now, having said that, that profitability also means that the companies in question don't need to be helped. So aid presented to a profitable company, if it's that profitable, it does not justify or justifies even less that there be help or subsidies. It doesn't matter what we call them. I think that debate about whether it's a subsidy or not is sterile. It means, do we support these industries or not? Do we allow the market to take over? Does Mr. McLean have something to add?
I completely agree with that point. Fiddling and playing semantic word games over subsidy versus financial support is deeply irresponsible and a waste of time. We have to eliminate all support to this industry. Furthermore, all these supports that industry are asking for, whether they're making record profits or not, I think that there's a moral issue to that, but it's really beside the point. The climate science is clear. We have to phase out fossil fuel production,
we're out of time,
and we have to do it
unfortunately.
quickly.
Okay, Ms. Collins, if you could, before asking your questions, if you could just move the mic away just a little bit, for the interpreters. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. First to Dr. McLean, you have mentioned in the past the WTO and UN Environment Program definitions of fossil fuel subsidies. These are well established and widely accepted. We just heard from EDC that they're not familiar with well established and widely accepted international definitions. Do you see a benefit for our corporations, crown corporations, our government, for Export Development Canada to adopt a broad internationally recognized definition of subsidy? And why don't you think the government has done so?
Thanks for the question. Yes, I would say to those that, and to EDC in particular, with all due respect, when it says that it's not providing subsidies, but it's providing supports, it's drawing a distinction without a difference when it comes to phasing out fossil fuel production. And if it's going to continue to ignore well-established, long-standing definitions of a subsidy that have been adopted internationally, which are very broad, then it ought to provide Canadians with the rationale why. But really, we should move beyond this pointless debate. We shouldn't be propping up an industry that we know and we don't have any choice about whether you like it or not. We have to phase it out.
Thank you. And Mr. Leroux, Canada's biggest emitters are paying the lowest carbon tax rate. We just received another scathing report from the Environment Commissioner on carbon pricing. These big companies are contributing only about 1/14 of the full carbon price. Would you consider these carbon tax loopholes as a fossil fuel subsidy?
You're talking about the OBPS in particular. I think yes, the answer is yes. However, I think there might be a reason why you might want to do this for competitiveness reason. But I think also that the tax break is too large. But in any case, it is imperative that the tax break be phased out over time. Okay, the OBPS addresses competitiveness abroad. It should be complemented by a policy that ensures competitiveness domestically, and border tax adjustments, which are tariffs on imports that depend on their carbon content and on the carbon price paid in the country of origin, so that the Canadian market is not flooded by carbon-intensive imports, is another avenue.
Thank you. Okay.
But the broad answer is yes.
We'll go now to Mr. Mazier.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the witnesses coming out. Mr. McLean, I'm kind of listening to you with quite concerning comments, I guess, about our energy future and what you're predicting here. I guess just to clarify here, you do honestly believe that we should absolutely stop oil and gas production by, at the very least, by 2034, if not sooner? You're absolutely complete agreement with that statement?
I believe in climate science. And that's what climate science tells us that we have to do to be on path to meet a 1.5 degrees Celsius and our net zero target.
Okay, but so yes, you would say sooner Canada can phase out of oil production, gas production, the better.
I think that Canada, as a rich, highly developed country, and a country that bears a disproportionate responsibility for having contributed to climate change, owes the world an obligation of leadership, which is expressly set out in Article 4.4 of the Paris Agreement, which we are obligated to follow.
So 2% of emissions in all the world, we should shut down our oil and gas emissions. That's good.
That's a misleading number, sir.
Okay. Do you have any idea what this would cost Canadians if we shut down oil and gas?
Absolutely. There will be costs. There will be distributional costs, but we can address those by shifting financing away from the fossil fuel industry, retraining workers, and shifting our economy to a green economy. This isn't a new concern, and we have plenty of guidance and work that's being done on how to achieve a just transition.
Okay, so Mr. McLean, there's one word that's been out of your vocabulary today is affordability. Are you aware of any type of, is there any concerns in this transition, anything about that, about energy affordability?
Oh, absolutely. Affordability is a key issue. But again, we can address affordability by not propping up the fossil fuels industry.
Yeah, in your talks and anything you said today, like how are you addressing that? How are you addressing the affordability for energy in Canada today?
Well, the best way to address it, sir, would be through what's called a subsidy swap. So we can achieve a just transition to sustainability and achieve energy justice by switching out subsidies to the fossil fuel industry and helping those who are most vulnerable who will be affected by the transition. Simple.
So, but not where are we going to get our energy from?
Renewable energy, sir.
And how are we going to afford it? So, okay, Today, I'll give you an example. So I represent a very rural riding. They have no other choices. What should I tell those families that are trying to decide whether they should go pick up groceries and what they can afford? Whether they go for groceries, what kind of groceries they can afford, how many miles they should put on their vehicle. How do you tell them what to choose? And when it comes to affordability, to live in Canada, what would I tell that person, that young family that says, well, I can't afford to put in the gas to fuel my vehicle?
Well, with respect, sir, the transition to decarbonization and sustainability is a systemic issue, and it can't be answered on an individual by individual basis. But what you could tell them is that smart policy choices would redistribute public finance away from fossil fuel industry players who do not need it and toward families like the one that you represent.
So that doesn't fill their fridge up, though. They can't feed their families when they can't afford the food. You haven't addressed it. To be quite honest, you don't really care about the affordability of it. We're just going to shut down the oil and gas industry, and there's no regard for Canadians' ability to purchase energy in this country right now.
With all due respect, sir, that's not true. And if you refer to my opening statement, I quote at length from the most recent report of the IPCC on climate mitigation, which addresses the distributional impacts of this transition and suggests ways of addressing those particular distributional impacts. And a subsidy swap is a very good way of doing that.
So we're out of time, Mr. Major. Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses here today, not just for being here today, but also for the work you're doing in your respective fields. And I was interested in the conversation that the member opposite was having regarding affordability. And I think it is a very good point, affordability for Canadians. But I don't think it has a lot to do with fossil fuel subsidies. I think our government is addressing affordability through a number of programs that we've introduced over the years. One of them, the Climate Action Incentive, which provides the rebate, but other things like the Canada Child Benefit and programs of support for seniors and for people who live with disabilities. And most recently, the child care program and dental care. So we can address affordability separately from fossil fuel subsidies, and I think they're both important and they both need to be addressed. But I think our discussion today is around subsidies. And I do have some questions going back to export development and Madame Lavery, if I could. I really want to go to basics because there's a lot of questions about the definition, and I don't think this exact definition matters as much. But if Export Development Canada is providing financial instruments, whether it's loans or guarantees, at market rates, and we are talking about the oil and gas industry, which is a mature and profitable industry, I'm wondering why they need your help. Like, what are the market gaps that exist, and why is it that EDC needs to continue to support, perhaps not subsidize, but support that industry? I'm just really curious about that.
Thank you for the question. So I would say two things really came out. One is there has been a withdrawal of support for the industry, and particularly the industry in Canada. One of your fellow committee members actually noted the situation vis-a-vis the US and the withdrawal. So we have seen a withdrawal of support, financial support for the industry itself. And really this means that we have while we've continued to reduce the level of financing support we've put into the industry, there are players who have needed that support, and that was particularly acute in 2020 with geopolitical situation and then the onset of the COVID pandemic. So that has really been what has triggered it. As we look to it now, what we really want to ensure is the financing is going towards transition type products. So this is capital expenditure specifically focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So actually having the capacity there, we hope will make sure that it goes, that they put in place that capital expenditure faster.
Thank you. And just to follow up to that, why is it that, especially if you're talking now about funding transitional programs and trying to get to things that more fall into the ESG category, why is it that the market isn't funding that? I've seen a real move in a lot of our commercial banks to ESG type projects, and there's a lot of talk about that. So why are there still gaps persisting then, if in fact we're talking about programs that fall under that rubric, if you will?
I think there are a few root causes for that one. Sometimes it could be linked to the technology, and the technology is more new or not as well tested. So you see that a lot in the clean technology space, and then actually introducing it into larger producers. And so early adoption of technology isn't something that the market necessarily does, either the financial market or the companies themselves. So that's one of the reasons why you see that. I think the other one, one of your other fellow committee members mentioned the actual taxonomy. And that's actually one of the things that we don't have, a Canadian taxonomy. We didn't have necessarily even Canadian stress test parameters. So actually getting it into the language of the Canadian financial community and the investing community is really important. And it was one of the reasons that we went out first with our sustainable bond framework to do that specifically, to actually put a taxonomy out there and language out there. I fully expect as conditions change, change, as I hoped we see an acceleration towards 2050, that taxonomy will need changing, but at the very least it establishes a baseline. And working with our two partners, BMO and RBC, as well as getting it externally rated, we hope that will put confidence into the market and allow other financial players to come. So in that instance, we see ourselves as leading to try and encourage other investors to come.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I know it goes quickly. The time goes quickly. I want to thank the witnesses for a very engaging discussion that obviously helps clarify our thinking. That's the whole point of these meetings. So we'll now break for a short time to connect the next panel, and we'll take it from there. Thank you again for appearing. We really appreciate it. To the next panel, we have with us Madame Annie Chalifou, professeure agrégée, excusez-moi, spécialiste des...
Associate Professor, Climate Policy Specialist, University of Sherbrooke. We also have with us Mr. Craig Golanowski, President and Managing Partner of Carbon Infrastructure Partners Corp. And from the International Institute for Sustainable Development, we have the pleasure of welcoming Mr. Aaron Cosby, who is a senior associate. Each witness has three minutes to make an opening statement. So we'll begin with Ms. Chaloux, Professor Chaloux. Can you hear me properly? Yes. Thank you. Well, thank you for allowing me to speak to this committee. I'm a professor at the School of Applied Politics, and I'm interested in... You will receive my detailed... My intervention is... The interpreter apologizes, but Ms. Chaloux is speaking much too fast.
Le Canada s'est engagé à faire sa part
et à réduire...
Un instant, s'il vous plaît, oui.
Yes, translation.
Interpretation? Yes, she's speaking. Okay, il faudrait...
Ms. Chaloux, you have to slow down a little bit. For the interpreters, so please go ahead. Thank you. Canada made a commitment to doing its share and reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 40 or 45% by 2030 and achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. It also made a commitment through international commitments to putting an end to fossil fuel subsidies, and respond to that objective is indispensable if we want to be credible on the international scene and do our fair share for the climate crisis. That is the consistency at stake here on the Canadian scene and internationally. You know that time is of the essence. We need to drastically reduce our, and that is part and parcel of the fossil fuel industry. There are three main problems in that industry in the fight against climate change. First of all, subsidies, whatever you call them, they support production of fossil fuels, and by supporting that sector, Canada cannot reduce its greenhouse gas emissions sufficiently. It also limits funding to low-emission industries. It slows down renewable energies because subsidies to fossil fuels prevent us from stopping the pollution of this industry to the detriment of renewable energy. And lastly, it stops or decelerates the transition. It mobilizes money into the problem and not into solutions for climate change. So the fact that subsidies would be redirected to, let's say, from hydrocarbons to something else, be it workers who are affected by the transition or the most vulnerable communities, that would allow us to accelerate that transition and get the country out of its dependency on that sector. Okay, we'll stop there and continue with Mr. Golinowski for 3 minutes, please.
Mr. Golinowski.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the committee for inviting me to present today on this critically important issue. Carbon Infrastructure Partners is a private equity firm that's invested in oil and gas production, and we've also created a fund product to advance investment into carbon capture and storage. So my remarks today are as follows. It is clear and urgent that we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions caused by fossil fuels, and that reaching our net zero goal by 2050 is an unprecedented challenge. In the past 100 years, the global population has grown by nearly fourfold to almost 8 billion people because of reliable and affordable energy, largely from fossil fuels. Solving climate change by 2050 is not as simple as eliminating fossil fuels and may be self-defeating. The objective should not be to eliminate fossil fuels. The objective should be to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. I summarize my message today in 4 key points. Number 1, we cannot reach net zero by 2050 without fossil fuels. It is simply physically impossible. Number 2, attempting to reach 2050 goals without fossil fuels raises serious risks for policymakers, governments being able to sustain long-term public support required for climate action. Number 3, while we cannot use fossil fuels without carbon capture and storage, this is the purpose of the investment tax credit that was announced by the government, and it needs to be promoted aggressively. And the investment tax credit needs to be complemented by the carbon tax. Investors in carbon capture and storage need to have certainty that carbon pricing is entrenched and that a new government cannot kill it or reduce it. Let me qualify these points further. We have 28 years to do away with 750 million tons of GHG emissions in Canada, and it is simply impossible to rally the magnitude of capital to invest in sufficient alternative energies. Second, without sufficient, reliable alternative energy, in times of high energy demand, the risk is inherent that energy prices will spike and people will not be able to afford to heat and cool their homes, and industry will not be able to produce many of the products we all rely upon. This is not speculation. This is precisely what's happened in Europe prior to the Russian invasion, where insufficient, reliable alternative energies forced a surge in fossil fuel use, including coal, pushing natural gas prices to $60 an MCF versus $3 to $4 as it is in Canada now. Support for CCUS is not a subsidy to the oil and gas industry, as some argue. It's a critical investment in reaching net zero.
This will be a topic of debate in the round of questions. I'm sorry, Mr. Golinowski, I have to stop you at the 3-minute mark because time is very tight. We'll go now to Mr. Cosby for 3 minutes.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. The International Institute for Sustainable Development is a nonpartisan Canadian policy think tank with over 30 years of experience and almost 20 years of globally respected work on fossil fuel subsidies in countries the world over. Our 2021 report that surveyed federal fossil fuel subsidies found subsidies worth $1.9 billion. Our 2022 report that focused on provincial subsidies found subsidies in 4 different provinces of $2.5 billion. These are conservative numbers. Many of the interveners you've heard have already told you that these kinds of subsidies, which increase consumption and production of fossil fuels in a time of climate crisis, are perverse, that they frustrate our commitments to achieving our Paris Agreement targets. But in my short time, I want to focus on a specific type of fossil fuel subsidies, not those that increase production and consumption of fossil fuels, which have been well covered, but rather subsidies to decarbonize the oil and gas sectors. We now have a target of net zero emissions in those sectors by 2050 and a targeted 42% decrease by 2030. And there are 2 very different pathways that will get us there. One forces firms to undertake emissions reductions, and the other forces Canadian taxpayers to fund them. The CCUS tax credit, budgeted at over $2.6 billion over 5 years, shows which pathway we seem to have chosen, and it is the wrong pathway. To be clear, we support many types of subsidies to address climate change. We can't hope to decarbonize industrial sectors like steel, cement, aluminum without major public subsidies and support. But subsidies to oil and gas are not like subsidies to those other sectors in 3 ways. Subsidies to steel, cement, and critical minerals help ensure the viability of industries whose product the world needs more of, whereas all of the modeling agrees that we need less oil and gas to avoid catastrophic climate change. Second, any public funds that result in more investment in oil and gas sectors simply build up assets that are at risk of being stranded. Our 2021 report, In Search of Prosperity, shows that post-2030, global demand for oil is going to be in secular decline with low and volatile prices. If we don't properly manage the ramp down of investment and production in that sector, the economic impacts are going to be acutely painful for oil-dependent regions, communities, and workers. And third, subsidies to oil and gas are therefore inefficient by any metric. Pick your metric. Those scarce taxpayer dollars would be more effectively spent supporting sectors that do have a bright future. Carbon fiber from bitumen, electric vehicles, green hydrogen, critical minerals, and spent on just transition measures for communities and workers in declining sectors. In closing, the oil and gas sectors are not like other sectors. They are not an appropriate target for subsidies aimed at reducing emissions. We should be investing our scarce fiscal resources in sectors that have long-term prosperity in mind for Canada, not encouraging investments in assets that are going to be stranded by global demand pressures long before the end of their useful economic life.
Thank you. Okay, I will go to the rounds of questioning. I'd really ask you to be as brief as possible so that we come in under the allotted time. We'll start with Mr. Seaback for 6 minutes.
Sure. Mr. Golinowski, we didn't get you sort of finished in your statement at support for CCUS is not a subsidy to the oil and gas industry, as some argue. It's a critical investment to reaching net zero. Do you want to expand upon that? I'll give you a few more moments to talk about that.
Yes, thank you. The basic reality of it is that fossil fuel demand is growing today on Earth by human beings, and that it's very basically impossible to replace fossil fuels. And so we need to reduce emissions, and so carbon capture and storage provides the means to do that. But it's also the case that in industries like cement, steel, power generation, and ammonia fertilizer production, those industries essentially use fossil fuels to produce those products, and carbon capture and storage can be equipped to reduce the emissions from the use of fossil fuels in those particular situations. And so, the basic reality of it is that we need to meet energy demands from 8 billion people. And we can see what happens if that starts not happening. So right now, globally, we have a very large fertilizer shortage globally. ammonia fertilizer production in Europe was required to be reduced as a result of insufficient natural gas over the course of the past several months. And so now we have an ammonia fertilizer problem globally. And so these unintended consequences to eliminating fossil fuels can show up in various places, including in the production of food, including in the production of, say, solar panels. Solar panels are made from coal. The cost of solar panels has increased significantly in the last 12 to 18 months because coal prices have skyrocketed. And so the point I'm simply making is that the energy system is a complex system, and ensuring that we have sufficient amounts of energy is how we will be able to reduce emissions. It costs energy and it costs capital and materials to actually reduce emissions. And so this is a complex problem, and carbon capture has an important role. I could talk more about how we finance that, but I'll pause there just with respect to the general question.
Thanks. That was very informative. We had some testimony in the previous panel saying Canada should stop producing all oil and gas by 2035. I think you would say invest in CCUS to reduce those emissions and continue to produce. I take it you'd agree with my statement there. And what do you think would be the effect to the Canadian economy if we stopped producing oil and gas by 2035, as was suggested by a previous panelist?
It's completely outrageous to even say that. The history of the last century is that the human population has grown to 8 billion people, and we've consumed ever increasing amounts of fossil fuels to do that. And so, Vaclav Smil, the eminent professor from the University of Manitoba, he clearly lays out the reasons why the modern world exists, and it's substantially because of fossil fuels. And so the reverse is true. If we are unable to supply a sufficient quantity of energy to the human population, we'll have famine, we'll have war, we'll have chaos. And so this is not an acceptable answer to just simply ignore how we achieved what we have in 2022. So with respect to the Canadian economy itself, the fact is demand for oil and gas is growing in the world. This is incorrect that there's a peak demand. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. So the Canadian economy's role in the world in many respects in terms of supplying things like grain, fertilizer, oil and gas products, a variety of industrial products, we do that because we use fossil fuels. And so this idea that we can just switch off fossil fuels it's ridiculous.
So I guess what you'd say is by using technology like CCUS and this, quote, subsidy, it's going to actually get oil and gas and other parts of the Canadian economy towards net zero without causing damages to the economy and prices and everything else.
Precisely. That's our view. We fully accept the goal of net zero. And how does humanity reduce greenhouse gas emissions from 40 billion tons annually down to a much lower number, perhaps net zero? Carbon capture and storage allows you to directly capture the emissions of CO2 and sequester those back into the subsurface. The capital that's needed to do that is significant. The operating costs needed to do that is significant. So it does require investment. But the comparison is what happens if we don't have sufficient energy?
Okay.
What happens if there's insufficient energy? So the cost of doing carbon capture is cheaper than not having.
We'll have to stop there and go to Ms. Thompson, please, for 6 minutes.
Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, Mr. Gold, sorry. Golinowski, if I'm saying your name correctly. Sorry, I had it written down. I've just lost that. But if I could continue with that thread, would you speak about how quickly, like the timelines around organizations moving to net zero emissions? Because we've heard so much today around the need to understand the temperature of 1.5 Celsius, that we need to move to net zero. So I don't think that's a question. But for me, the confusion is around how we do this, understanding geopolitical realities, but also understanding how our world relies on energy just all of us, just to move from one end of our day to the other.
Yes, I mean, it's an unprecedented challenge. It's absolutely extraordinary. And so in terms of carbon capture and storage, perhaps I can speak to that in a Canadian context. And with respect to energy development generally, I mean, 10 years is a planning cycle for energy projects. And so if we endeavor today to set off for perhaps a 15 to 30 million ton annual goal of capturing and sequestering CO2 emissions, it's probably an 8 to 10 year process to realize that, to fully do the engineering, the permitting process, the financing, and construction. And so the way I sort of look at this is, what can we accomplish in a decade? And what are the things that we need to do with respect to regulations, with respect to pore space allocation, with respect to financing structures, engineering, to actually realize on the goal of, say, between 15 and 30 million tons annually. Once we achieve that sort of phase one, then in the next decade, perhaps that could be doubled or tripled. And then perhaps in the decade following, you could, double or triple it thereafter. But this is an incredible engineering problem to solve as well.
Thank you. So somewhat on the same line of thought, public financing of the fossil fuel sector. Would you speak about that? It tends that there's not a lot of common thought on what it is that we're speaking about. So from your perspective, I'd really be interested in your thoughts.
Well, with respect to carbon capture and storage specifically, the range of applications includes power, cement, fertilizer. It could also include the production of oil sands. So this spans a wide range. The capital investment needed to build a carbon capture and storage device and the sequestration, the wells, requires a certain amount of upfront capital. After the operating costs are significant. And so the way the United States has approached this problem is to create a tax credit for 12 years that would pay for basically the capital and operating costs. And they've done that through one program, the Section 45Q tax credit. In Canada, the investment tax credit allows for half, perhaps, of the capital upfront to be shared between the government and the private sector. And then the government will need to contractually guarantee or ensure that the carbon tax remains in place. And so then when the private sector looks at financing these projects, the investment rates of return and how to do those calculations, that's a law. I mean, as a fiduciary, as a manager of capital, how we do these decisions is described in law. And so basically there needs to be a rate of return for a pension fund or other sorts of institutional investors to invest in this space. And so this framework of the investment tax credit combined with a guarantee on the carbon tax will allow institutional capital to invest in this broader asset class, which we've called sort of carbon management infrastructure.
Thank you. And again, I'm interested in your thoughts on this. We've heard so much about, oil and gas, the timelines of when we need to move away from the resource and move into other resources that obviously are net zero. Do you see a role for oil and gas in that transition in terms of also being able to continue to supply resources that fuel the world's needs, so that it's not one or the other, but it's really how all stakeholders become part of a transition and move into the realities of a world of net zero.
Basically 30 seconds, please.
Sure. Our perspective is the binary that we need to eliminate oil and gas and do renewables is impossible. Renewables are made from fossil fuels. The copper that's going to go into the solar panel is fundamentally made from diesel in the mining process. So this is impossible to eliminate oil and gas because you use oil and gas to make renewables. So the system is not simple, it's complex, and carbon capture allows you to still use the energy embedded in fossil fuels while we build out renewables, nuclear, and the other alternatives.
Merci. Alors, Madame Posé pour 6 minutes.
Ms. Posey, for 6 minutes, please. You have the floor. Hello. Well, I thank our witnesses. First, my question will be for Ms. Chaloux. I'm very pleased to see you again. It's been a long time. You work a lot on environmental paradiplomacy, trans-border issues and relations. You talked about the fact that Canadian statements in various diplomatic fora regarding its intentions to fight climate change are often opposite to government action. So when we know the place of Canada in the production of hydrocarbons and therefore of greenhouse gases, what are the repercussions that can be considered in this environmental paradiplomacy? Thank you for your question. It's a question of Canadian responsibility and the provincial responsibility, too, that they commit to climate change. We see that some provinces are very proactive, have ambitious plans. Other provinces seem to be lagging behind for economic reasons associated with production of hydrocarbons, as we're discussing today. And one of the challenges is when it comes to subsidies, any funding given to this sector of activity is a brake on the fight against climate change and prevents Canada not only from respecting its commitments, but doing its fair share. Canada is a significant contributor to this problem. So we have to note that, because any additional emissions has an impact on the entire planet. So it's really an international responsibility that's a major one. It has to be put forward. And if we look at the case of hydrocarbons, well, it's one of Canada's international commitments. It has to do something as fast as possible for this transition. But you, Ms. Chaloux, you certainly study legislation elsewhere in the world. So what is Canada exposing itself to, given those policies elsewhere in the world that seem much more restrictive than what's going on here in Canada? Well, right now, Canada's commitments about ending subsidies are not restrictive or constrictive. And Canada is in good faith trying to put an end to ineffective subsidies to oil and gas, but Canada has the reputation of having ambitious goals but not respecting those objectives. So that harms our credibility on the international scene. Since more and more countries have ambitious plans, well, eventually there could be sanctions, whether it's economic or reputation, especially because Canada will not be considered a credible actor. And that's where the question of hydrocarbons is fundamental, because that's the elephant in the room when you talk about climate change. And as long as we directly and indirectly support this sector of activity, we're investing in the problem rather than investing in the solution, and that has an impact elsewhere in the world. In the current context, and given the international body's report, do you think that if the government chooses to continue to support the oil and gas industry, it has to have mechanisms to increase the responsibility of producers? I think it has to go beyond that. Canada has to put an end to any direct or indirect subsidy to the oil and gas industry, and that type of subsidy as credits can be reoriented to workers, for instance, because that's the key. How do we accompany these workers who are working that sector that's problematic to make sure they have a good standard of living? How do we help them in this transition, as well as communities that are vulnerable, are more dependent on hydrocarbons so that they can eventually do the transition? But when it comes to the industry, they're not the ones we have to support because they are the ones that bear the burden of this problem. If we subsidize them, it creates an unusually low cost of doing business for these companies. The cost would be much higher if there weren't these subsidies, and the transitions would take place much faster. There is a Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment. I don't hear much about their work. I wonder if they're up to the task. Could that be one tool, or are there other tools that you know of that could allow various jurisdictions to get on the right path? Well, in Canada, we have a major challenge with interprovincial cooperation. How do we increase our ambitions and our targets? The Council of Environmental Ministers may be one solution, but the commitments made are not restrictive. Some of them talk about the Council of the Federation. Those are the premiers of the provinces. So the more fora we find to practice, to share best practices, the better. But sharing skills in Canada being what it is, it's very difficult to put this in place. That means it's necessary to be very proactive at the federal level to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, your time is more or less expired, Ms. Posey. All right, that's the end of my questions then, I guess. For now, only for now. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my first question is to Mr. Cosby. In our last panel, we heard a bit about how Canada's regulatory framework has been captured by the fossil fuel industry. The government has met with oil and gas companies thousands of times, but refused to meet with any of the 400 experts who collectively called on the government to not fund CCUS. You mentioned we have two paths: to either regulate the industry and get fossil fuel companies to pay for reducing their own pollution, or to make taxpayers pay for it. Can you speculate why the government continues to choose a path where they hand over public dollars to profitable fossil fuel companies?
I can speculate. Obviously, you'd have to ask the government for a definitive opinion on that. But my speculation is political expediency. It's a way to have your cake and eat it too, or so they think. However, it is short-term thinking. The idea that you can meet your Paris Agreement commitments and have a healthy economy by subsidizing a solution like CCUS ignores two facts. One, if everybody did that, if we did it the world over, you're only solving 20% of the problems of fossil fuels. The other 80% occurs when you burn those fossil fuels in generation facilities or cars. That's where the real pollution happens. So you haven't solved that. But the other problem is that you can't imagine a future in which you chug away happily producing the same level of fossil fuels we're producing now, post-2030. In contradiction to what a previous witness said, there is a peak. Even the Canadian Energy Regulator says there's a peak by 2032, following which we have following demand, and that's on assumptions which I would question. I would say it's coming even earlier than that, and that implies a disaster for the Canadian economy if we allow ourselves to continue being so dependent on the oil and gas sectors.
Thank you so much. Can you describe Canada's progress on phasing out fossil fuel subsidies and how this progress might compare to our international peers?
Well, look, our performance in the G20 peer review process has been abysmal and is an international embarrassment. There have been 3 peer reviews that were conducted before the current one that we're undertaking with Argentina, all of which were concluded in 2 years or less. We started ours over 4 years ago, and there's no progress since then. So, the facts speak for themselves. We have not progressed well by international benchmarks in the process of phasing out our fossil fuel subsidies, nor have we progressed well in the important question of trying to define what is an efficient or inefficient subsidy, which is crucial to our commitment.
Thanks so much. And we heard in our last panel that Export Development Canada they're not familiar with well-established and widely accepted international definitions. Can you just quickly talk about the benefit of Canada adopting a broad international recognized definition of a subsidy and what you think about Export Development Canada's claim that they're not familiar with these?
Two things on that question. One, we have an internationally accepted definition of subsidies. It's the WTO definition. This is not just used by the WTO, of which Canada is a member, of course, but also used by the OECD in compiling their statistics on fossil fuel subsidies, by the IEA as they compile their statistics. It's used as an indicator for the Sustainable Development Goal 12.1, which benchmarks international achievement of fossil fuel subsidy reduction. This is an internationally accepted definition. So that's one point. Second point, though, I would agree with the sentiment that came out in the last set of discussions. It doesn't matter so much. The really important question is not, is this dollar spent on a subsidy? The really important question is this dollar spent in a way which is a good use of public funds? And you have the criteria for that are not the same as whether it's a subsidy or not. The criteria are, is it in line with our Paris Agreement targets? Is it an efficient use of funds considering the target? Are there better ways you could use that money? And are you contributing to the risk of stranded assets? Those are the kinds of criteria we really need to be worrying about.
And when it comes to the $2.6 billion for the CCUS tax credit, just quick, both from Mr. Cosby and Ms. Chaloux, you both consider that to be inefficient use of public funds?
Efficiency depends on what your goal is. If your goal is employment retention, if your goal is future prosperity for Canadians, if your goal is
keeping the global warming below 1.5 degrees.
No, because 80% of the emissions that come from the gas that's extracted are emitted in the process of combustion in cars and in fossil fuel, in gas generation plants.
Je me permets d'abonder dans le même sens que M. Cosby.
I would agree with Mr. Cosby. Of course, any subsidy in this sector of activity, be it CCUS, prevents us from helping an industry that really needs the help.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, how long do I have?
5 seconds.
Sorry, say that again?
You have about 35 seconds.
Okay. Maybe just very quickly, can you, Mr. Cosby, talk about some of the policies that would accelerate the development of clean, renewable energy initiatives?
20
Absolutely.
seconds, Mr. Cosby.
So, sure. Let's invest in diversifying the Alberta and Saskatchewan economies using the resources we have, the project management capacity, the natural resources. Let's focus on what you can do with bitumen other than burning it in cars. You can make carbon fiber, you can make asphaltene, you can make lithium out of the byproducts of that.
Thank you.
There are many ways in which
we have to move on to Mr. Mazur for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is for the IASD, I guess, Mr. Cosby. You published a 2021 report on federal fossil fuel subsidies in Canada. In that report, you listed the following as fossil fuel subsidies: $6 million for Indigenous natural resource partnerships, $2.37 million for a diesel generating station in a Northern Ontario community, and various, quote, Indigenous Services Canada investments in natural gas and diesel projects and electricity price support for Indigenous communities. We've heard in this committee that these investments are very important to some communities. However, you also stated in your report, and I quote, fossil fuel subsidies are not consistent with net zero commitments. Do you see any concern with the impact that eliminating these investments that you have defined as subsidies will have on Canadians in the name of net zero?
I thank you for a careful reading of our report, during which you will have noted that we support some types of fossil fuel subsidies. It's a matter of record that I repeated in this committee testimony. There are some fossil fuel subsidies which may be necessary, and I consider subsidies to energy in remote and northern communities to be part of those, although at the same time we should be sinking as much or more money into diversifying the energy sources in those communities away from diesel generators. But this comes back to my point. It's not a question of whether it's a subsidy or not. Some subsidies are good, some subsidies are bad. It's a question of whether it's a good use of public funds.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Golowinski, global energy demand is rising and countries around the world are begging for clean Canadian oil and gas to displace Russian energy. Do you believe that it is better for the global environment to be supplied by Canadian oil and gas?
I do unequivocally believe that we have no alternative to the use of oil and gas to supply energy for the population of 8 billion people, and that we need to capture the emissions from the use of that oil and gas and sequester it to meet our net zero goals. And that, power generation, cement production, steel production, fertilizer production are all based on fossil fuels. So too are renewables. Solar panels are made from coal. Wind turbines are made from coal. I mean, this is just a reality. And so if we are unable to accept that proposition and we constrain the ability to supply reliable energy, then Putin can weaponize energy. He can weaponize food, which is what he's doing by restricting exports of fertilizer. And so this idea that we can just simply eliminate fossil fuels will result in a lot of problems. And so Canada's role is to be able to deliver energy while we reduce our emissions using a proven technology. It's nascently deployed, proven though. And we need to establish that carbon capture and storage is a global scale solution to emissions.
That's a nice segue into my next question, actually, for you. I see your organization actually has a lot of research on carbon capture and utilization and storage. So do you believe that the government needs to invest in this technology for the sector to succeed in Canada?
The way we think about this basic problem is it's like any other form of utility infrastructure, for example, water infrastructure or sewage infrastructure, where a value needs to be put on an avoided emission. The government is the only entity that can do that. It started to do that with the carbon tax. But basically, the investors in the carbon capture equipment and that infrastructure need to know that there's a rate of return for their invested capital. And so we can look at models like municipal utility infrastructure and how we reduce the cost of capital so that every dollar of public money that goes into this on the investment tax credit achieves the largest number of tons. And so we have to reduce the risk as much as possible for the capital providers that invest in the space.
Good. And I guess we do need to invest in it. And has there been any barriers that you think, like there's something top of mind you could tell the committee that here, if we focused on this would make your job and our job a lot easier in getting this project moving forward?
We'll have to keep that answer for another question, Mr. Golonowski.
Okay.
Mr. Duguid.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd also like to thank our witnesses for some great testimony, and also welcome our friend from Mr. Cosby from ISD, which is located in Winnipeg, and we're very, very proud to host them, and I congratulate them on the support for the Experimental Lakes area that we provided in the 2022 budget. Just, Mr. Chair, a couple of comments and then a question or two to Mr. Golonowski, who I'm very happy is with us today. Mr. Golonowski, I think you probably followed with interest our emissions reduction plan that was released a few weeks ago, a mix of measures, pricing, which I think everyone has emphasized is important, but also support for technology, clean technology, a variety of technologies, including CCUS. A number of our witnesses have portrayed the technology as unproven, and that's a direct quote, utterly ineffective, that's a direct quote, and Mr. Cosby has just raised some concerns about stranded assets and that this would not be particularly a good use of public funds. In your view, can we get to our ambitious targets? I know some people think they're not ambitious enough, but 40 to 45% 2030, net zero by 2050. And given what is happening in the U.S. with the 45Q tax credit that the Biden administration is not only supporting but amplifying, what would happen if that incentive was not in the 2022 budget? Where would that investment go, and where would it leave our country?
Well, that's an important point. So the United States, I think, is taking a much more realistic view of reducing emissions in terms of integrating carbon capture and storage as a solution. And so, for industries, if Canada is not competitive, then perhaps, you could just shut down the fertilizer plant here and move it to Montana, for example. Because facing a carbon tax without an ability to reduce those emissions in an industrial way, when across the border, the alternative would be that the United States government essentially pays for your capture and sequestration solution straight away, is simple. You shut down in Canada and reinvest in the United States.
Okay. And thank you for that. And my follow-up question, Mr. Chair, probably bring me to the end of my time. The UN International Energy Agency, I believe the IPCC Working Group 3 report all say CCUS is essential to meeting global targets for greenhouse gases. That's my understanding, and yet, on the other hand, do say that we do need to phase out the use of fossil fuels. I wonder if you would have, a comment on that. And is this, scaling up this technology globally, technology transfer to China, to India, is that not really where we need to go? Again, I take Mr. Mazur's point. We have some of the highest per capita emissions, but in the great scheme of things, our emissions compared to China and India, of course, are not as large, and we need to help those nations with technology transfer because, of course, the atmosphere is the commons, and we are experiencing the tragedy of the commons with increasing greenhouse gas emissions.
45 seconds, Mr. Golinowski.
Yes, thank you. Look, these projections and scenarios that show the elimination of fossil fuels are total speculation. There's no evidence for it. They're projections made on simulation models to show a mathematical process of how you could possibly do this. It's not, these are speculations. China and India are rich natively in coal. They will continue to use coal. And so if we are unable to show how to use carbon capture and storage so that we can export that to China and India, they'll use coal unabated. And we will have no chance of meeting any of our global targets.
Perfect.
These are the harsh realities.
Madame Posey, 2 minutes et demi.
Ms. Posey, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to give Ms. May my time.
To cover on the evidence we've had in the 2 rounds. I'm going to focus my questions to Aaron Cosbey, and I'm doing this in tribute to my conservative friends because I was at the press conference where Brian Mulroney and Gary Filmon launched the International Institute for Sustainable Development, and I recall that the first Prime Minister who promised to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies was Stephen Harper at the G20 in Cincinnati. And I think, I like to sometimes use my memory and challenge Google. I can't find on the IISD website, Aaron Cosbey, the first report, but my memory says that Aaron Cosbey and IISD may have done the first groundbreaking work on fossil fuel subsidies before we pledged to get rid of them. So my question to you, Aaron Cosbey, is, am I right? How long have you been working on this? And give us your best advice about how fossil fuel subsidies are preventing us from holding to a habitable planet.
Well, my memory is not much better than yours. I'm getting advanced in years. It has been a couple of decades, right? So yes, you're right. Our work on this stuff precedes Canada's commitment to phase out fossil fuel subsidies. And at the foundation of that work is, what you imply. The basic premise that subsidizing fossil fuel consumption in a time of climate emergency is akin to putting your foot on the accelerator as you head toward a cliff, when what you should be doing is braking and changing course, right? We don't need more production and consumption of fossil fuels. That's what fossil fuel subsidies encourage. We need less. We need those same public dollars to go toward finding the solutions, the very real solutions, the replacements for fossil fuels, which exist. Green hydrogen is a replacement for fossil fuels in fertilizer production. Green hydrogen is a replacement for fossil fuels in steel production. We have the technologies to replace fossil fuels in industrial production, in transport, in residential heating. They exist. It's not a fairy tale.
Do I have any time left?
For comment.
To Aaron Cosby, do we need coal to make solar panels?
No, we do not.
Okay.
Neither do we make it. Neither to make copper. It's not.
It was a bit absurd, but I didn't get anything on the record in 10 seconds. Thank you.
Well, we got the answer to that. We did get the answer to that question. Okay, Ms. Collins.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. My colleague, Mr. Duguid, just said that the IPCC says that carbon capture, utilization, and storage is essential. That's not how I read the report. My question is to Mr. Cosby. It turns out we recently found out that Canada actually lobbied the IPCC to increase the importance of carbon capture in the text. I'm curious if you have any comments on this.
I always have comments. Look, carbon capture and storage is essential, especially in sectors like cement, where we don't see a clear pathway to deep decarbonization. And we used to think it was essential in sectors like steel, but technological progress has pushed us to a point where we see those pathways, and I'm sure we'll see those pathways in future in cement too. But for the moment, it's useful in those sectors. It is not necessarily useful in the oil and gas sector, right? I go back to my point. These sectors are very different. The IPCC report, the third working group report that just came out, I also want to specify, ranked all the possible solutions in terms of feasibility and cost, and carbon capture was this small red-colored portion at the bottom, high cost, high risk, right? If you want to pick a solution to decarbonization, it's not CCUS.
You mentioned that you support some subsidies, especially those that support northern remote Indigenous communities. Can you give us a picture of how the dollar amounts compare that those current subsidies make up versus the subsidies that you wouldn't support?
Well, I can give you a snapshot of how much we are currently putting in public support toward renewables versus fossil fuels, and it's 12 to 1. I'll let that sink in. That doesn't speak well to how we are prioritizing real climate action.
Thanks so much. And would you like to respond to any of more of Mr. Glowinski's comments about how we rely on fossil fuels to make renewable energies, and so we need to invest in fossil fuel companies?
Look, we currently use coal to produce copper. That's true. We use gasoline, we use diesel in the vehicles which mine the copper and process it. But you can use hydrogen in those vehicles as well, and hydrogen can be produced through electrolysis. Green hydrogen is the wave of the future. If you want to invest in green energy of the future that has a promising, sustained prosperity for the future of Canadians, invest there, because that is also possible. Because we do it now doesn't mean we have to do it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go now to Mr. Carey for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I find the conversation incredibly informing and interesting. I did want to go back to Mr. Golinowski. One of the comments you made, which I think was poignant, you mentioned the goal should be eliminate greenhouse gases, not fossil fuels. And, I would like to investigate some of the pragmatic solutions that you may have on the top of your head. I know in Europe, for example, Germany did eliminate some of their traditional ways of generating electricity, for example, and now under times of stress, I think they were forced now to increase production with coal. Mr. Duguid mentioned how we in Canada have some technology. We should be helping some of these emerging economies move forward. Could you comment on some of these pragmatic solutions that perhaps Canada could be sending out around the world to help achieve our goals as a global contributor to decreasing global greenhouse gases?
Yes, so thank you. I mean, as a starting position, a price on carbon is absolutely essential. Valuing carbon is the starting point for all the discussions, so that fossil fuels and renewables and cement and steel and power and fertilizer, we all compete to solve the emissions problem by knowing precisely what the value is for avoiding that carbon emission. And so that's absolutely essential. And that carbon price must be not subject to political change. So in other words, the biggest challenge we're facing right now when we speak to institutional investors like pension funds is that people don't believe the federal carbon tax is durable up to $170 a ton, and that it'll ultimately be changed through the political process. And so having a contractual guarantee or some sort of assurance that the value of an avoided emission remains in place is absolutely critical. And so the problem generally is if the government's picking winners or losers, or that the market forces are not functioning. So in Germany, for example, the Germans shut down effectively their nuclear industry on the advice of environmentalists, perhaps, who suggested that renewables would be able to replace that baseload energy. And in fact, the result has been an increase in the use of coal and an ability for Russia to weaponize energy supply to Germany. And so, taking away reliable baseload energy on the basis of sort of ideology, this is something we absolutely have to avoid. And so, carbon capture as an overall solution, I deeply believe plays a pragmatic role, because I start from the basic proposition that the growth in the human population, how the modern world works, is based on fossil fuels. And this idea that we're just going to simply eliminate fossil fuels, I don't accept that. So I start from, what are we actually going to do about this problem given what's reality today? And what can I do when I wake up tomorrow? And we've committed ourselves to advancing carbon capture and storage because we genuinely see a pathway to using our skills in the subsurface, our engineering skills, to our financial structuring skills, to deploy capital and have projects come to fruition that begin to reduce emissions.
Can I ask you to comment as well on the competitive side of things? You mentioned Canada and US, and I think you had a good example on fertilizer. Our biggest competitor, the US used to be, I guess, our best customer for energy. Now they're a competitor, though they are moving back to a customer status. But the Americans have different ways of subsidizing and supporting their industry. You mentioned the carbon tax in Canada. We have one. The Americans don't. Can you comment on the importance of certainty one way or another? Like the Americans seem to be eating our lunch internationally on a lot of these contracts and investments. What are they doing that perhaps we could be doing as well to help our competitiveness, especially in North America?
Unfortunately, we're out of time. We'll have to go to Mr. Longfield for 5 minutes. Mr. Longfield is the last questioner before we adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And would you like to answer the last question from Mr. Kerry? Mr. Kerry and I seem to be sharing brain waves today. That's a scary thought. To Mr. Galinaski.
Oh, yes. So what I saw, I spent a year living in California and was able to attend a variety of seminars and conferences at Stanford on carbon capture and storage. And there's two observations that I made while being there. One was that the capital market, the financial system, it has to be the funders of climate solutions generally. And so the project finance principles, the fiduciary duty principles of investors, these are well known in law. And so the first thing is the United States is trying to create a market mechanism for capital formation to manage carbon emissions. That's point one. Point two is the United States doesn't hate industry. They want industry to be productive, and what we saw, in particular at the state level, the states like North Dakota, Wyoming, Illinois. Wyoming, I mentioned that, Louisiana, sort of the industrial states per se that have sequestration opportunities. Those states want those industries to stay in business. They don't want those industries to be phased out. And so at the state level, they've tried to support carbon capture as a means to keep those jobs and industries alive and those facilities continuing to operate for the long term.
Great, thank you. When we talk about market mechanisms, this morning we had some reports coming out of the Commissioner for Sustainability and Climate Change from the Auditor General's office saying that our carbon pricing mechanisms we've put in place are not achieving some of the results on the high emitters. And I haven't gone through all the details, but in the summary report, I think it was pointing the finger at Alberta, saying we need to have a higher price on carbon in Alberta in order to have a more equitable policy so that the higher emitters will be paying more for the carbon that they're producing. How would us having to look at that report and move forward on changing pricing mechanisms? You talked about price stability and investment potential if we're changing the field of play. I'm taking my initial reaction would be that this would be good for your business or the businesses around carbon capture and storage if the price went up, but could be bad on the oil industry if we don't have some kind of relief for them through carbon capture and storage.
The price of carbon emissions does need to go up for carbon capture and storage to make sense. It probably needs to be, somewhere in the order of $100 a ton because of the costs of doing carbon capture. And, for the industries, like, for example, power. Okay, so the power industry in Alberta, the consumer in Alberta will end up paying for the carbon capture and storage because the cost of electricity will be higher, and the extent to which the price of electricity is higher is partially related to the investment tax credit. So if the investment tax credit was less, the price of electricity just needs to go up further in order to justify the carbon capture and storage. So the calculation on how to figure out the rate of return on the invested capital, that is not a very complex calculation. Right. And so, but I do want to emphasize the point that, many of these projects require billions of dollars of capital. Right. And so investors are rightly asking, how durable is the carbon tax?
Right. And I think the indication is from the Auditor General's office that it should be durable, in fact, should be progressing faster than what we're putting out into the market right now.
Merci. On va s'arrêter là.
Thank you. We'll stop there. I'd like to thank our witnesses for this and the members for the stimulating and in-depth discussion. I'd like to remind members that Thursday we received the Commissioner, and I would ask whether you wish this meeting to adjourn. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.